You probably either know me from this YouTube channel or you might know me as being a track and field coach at Wichita State. But for a long part of my life, racing was a big part of it. I would go-kart race and win trophies like this, sometimes weekly, not every week, but often ended up with, a couple hundred trophies from racing throughout the years. But I was from a racing family. My dad and his brothers raced hydroplanes. My brothers raced motorcycles. And so then I eventually came along and was racing go-karts kind of in the Midwest area. And so when the opportunity to go visit the Richard Petty and Family Museum in Level Cross, North Carolina came about because I was there for a track meet in the Charlotte area, I definitely had to go. And so definitely been a Petty family fan. And Richard Petty obviously is the king, as you'll see if you're not real familiar with him. Kyle Petty is his son. Lee Petty was Richard's dad, who was like the original NASCAR Daytona 500 champion, and then Adam Petty was Kyle's son. And so this was kind of a bucket list place for me to go and check out, and all those members of the family are represented in the museum. Level Cross also has a little bit of a history, and so we'll check out the unincorporated community of which this famous racing family came from. And then we'll swing by the Victory Junction camp where the Petty family has devoted a lot of their life to helping disadvantaged children. Let's head to Level Cross, North Carolina and check out everything Petty. There is Level Cross right below us. That's pretty much the whole community. It's unincorporated and in Randolph County, North Carolina. It's in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The first settlers arrived to this area in the mid-1700s during a period of Appalachian settlement by Highland Scots. They grew corn, cotton, and tobacco and raised livestock. Post office opened in 1876 and it closed in 1904. So it never got more than a few hundred people in the area and then has probably gotten smaller since then. The name Level Cross comes from its flat kind of main intersection that you see there. Right next to this church in the downtown area is the cemetery, and this is where Lee Petty and his wife are buried. We're going to learn more about Lee Petty and all the family. This is just a short little drive over to the Petty Museum. Once we get inside the museum, we see the distinctive Richard Petty hat. It's a symbol for the different hats that he wore, and these are the championship trophies. So there's a lot of different things to see here in the museum, and kind of at the beginning, if you go to the right, an unusual part of it before we get into all the racing stuff I want to show you here is there's a little collection of knives and then rings and things like that, but then there's some guns, and then you walk into this next room and it's just a couple hundred different guns, and apparently Richard Petty had a obsession with collecting guns, and there's some amazing guns in here. And you start looking through them and seeing the labels on them. I mean, there's some very historic guns. There's Pancho Villa gun there. So the amount of guns is kind of overwhelming. And that one's labeled Abraham Lincoln, and it had different presidents on it. Early on in the museum, it starts kind of telling about the history of the Petty family, and there's just so much memorabilia. If you're a fan of racing, it's pretty awesome. And then these are all the kind of family members, the Pettys, and then also Dale Inman, who was the crew chief. He lived here in Level Cross and was a cousin, and so it was really a family effort, this whole Petty racing thing. The museum opened up in 1998 here. It ended up moving to nearby Randleman in 2003 because they didn't have enough space, and then it came back here in 2014. So it's nice that I think that the museum is back home in Level Cross because it's really the main thing to see. There's not a whole lot to see in Level Cross except for coming to the museum, so it brings some people to Level Cross. So Lee Petty, he was the original Petty that was racing, and he was number 42. And he raced and won 3 championships. He had 56 wins in NASCAR. And so whenever you see the 42 around, that's Lee Petty. He had a really awful crash that ended his career. And then the 43 was Richard Petty. And so he kind of took over the family business in terms of the racing side of it, and Lee Petty was more, the kind of the CEO back in the day. And so most of the museum is about Richard Petty because he won 200 races, he won 7 championships, named the king. I mean, he was the most popular, the most famous race car driver ever, probably. And he always wore the sunglasses and had the hat. And I mean, there's him with all kinds of celebrities, and this museum just has tons of pictures of him with famous people because he was such an iconic figure. And there's lots of his cars in here. That Petty blue color, very distinctive as well. That was just the color that they came up with in the early days when they were the paint that they had left. So Linda Petty was Richard's wife, so they have a little corner here devoted to her. Obviously, being the wife of a race car driver is pretty thankless, and so that's nice that they have a section dedicated to her. And STP is on a lot of the cars. That was the main sponsor back in the day. This is a little kids section, and the movie Cars. You can see how all the little things over there, but he was the king.
The Piston Cup. Does the King, Strip Weathers, have one more victory in him before retirement?
He's been Dynaco's golden boy for years. Can he win them one last Piston Cup?
I loved collecting Hot Wheel race cars as a kid, and so there's so many die-cast cars and different toys. So, man, if you were a kid, you have access to this, it would have been pretty amazing. Richard Petty had a short political career. He ran for office and was not successful, but he did kind of become popular in that world. And you can see he's met all kinds of presidents, and he's got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Probably the only NASCAR driver that has something like that. So just tons of stuff. This is the main building. When you walk in, there are 3 buildings we're going to check out. And so you can just see all of the stuff. It's overwhelming. You could spend hours in there. So we're going to leave that building, walk across the parking lot. This is over to the Kyle Petty building. So Kyle was Richard's son, and he raced for different teams, but he also came back to eventually own the team or be the kind of CEO of the team eventually. His number was 44 and then 45 later on. And Kyle was not as successful, but he did win 8 championships. He finished as high as 5th place in the point standings a couple times. So that's one of his cars he raced for a different team, number 21. So you see what the inside of a 1980s, 1990s car looked like. They have other old vehicles owned by the Pettys, which is pretty interesting. This one here was a drag car. They went drag racing for a short period of time. They were kind of protesting NASCAR and decided, hey, we're just going to go drag racing. And so they have the old drag car in there now. Obviously, back to 43, these are a lot of Richard Petty's cars. 45 there, that was Kyle's car. And so just a bunch of different types of vehicles. There's a truck they raced. So pretty interesting if you're into cars. I like cars. I'm not a super big car guy, but it is fascinating looking at all these cars that I watched on television for decades. Really cool. And most of them have that distinctive look with the Petty blue color and the STP logo. And this was Richard's last race. He did wreck, and they still have the wrecked car. That's pretty cool. So over to 45, Adam Petty was Kyle's son. And unfortunately, Adam died in a car wreck and in a racing accident. He raced for 3 years in the Infinity Series, which is the second tier level. And then he did race one race in Cup, and he was killed in practice. He was only 19 years old, so it was definitely a tragedy. And if you learn about the Pettys, then it's one of the, sadder chapters is his death. And so then when he passed away, he was number 45. As you keep going, 42 was Lee, 43 was Richard, 44 was Kyle, 45 was Adam. So Kyle was still racing at the time, and so he took over the 45 car, and so he raced the 45 the rest of his career. And so when you see 45, sometimes it was Adam's car, sometimes it was Kyle's car. And there's a little video of Adam winning a race early in his career. A lot of the old trophy cases are here. Look like some of my trophies, probably in some of the same years. Similar kind of looking trophies. But yeah, you can imagine how many trophies this family has. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of trophies. And one last building, it's a small little visit. We walk over here. And this was the original garage where Lee Petty built his first race cars. This is actually a National Historic Landmark. And really interesting if you're into the history of racing. And that's the shed, I guess you'd call it, that Lee Petty built the first race cars. Really the beginnings of NASCAR history is right inside this shed. And on the floor, you can see where Lee Petty engraved his initials in 1949. That's pretty cool. So that's the tour of the Petty Museum and level cross. So let's head down the road a few miles to Victory Junction. Victory Junction is a non-profit camp founded in 2004 by the Petty family in memory of Adam, who we talked about, who passed away at age 19. This camp is dedicated to enriching the lives of children ages 6 to 16 that have serious illnesses or chronic medical conditions. At no cost to the families, it offers a place where kids can enjoy classic camp activities like swimming, zip lining, horseback riding, fishing, stuff like that. And it's obviously among a NASCAR-themed property. And through the years, almost over 20 years now, they've welcomed more than 125,000 children and family members. So this is a really cool place I've been wanting to visit. You hear about it a lot. If you watch NASCAR, you'll hear about the Victory Junction property and all the amazing things that they do here, helping young children that need it the most. All these buildings here, I'm guessing, are probably like the dorm area, and they're all named after different racetracks that are on the NASCAR circuit in all bright colors. And they have a terrific water tower there. Love all the water towers. And start walking through it. Obviously, there's no one here at the moment. I think they're getting ready for their summer camp activities, and kind of felt like a kid myself walking around checking out all the fun stuff. And you can see their NASCAR themed stuff here, movie theater and different shops and places that, like I said, if you're a kid coming to summer camp, you'd have a lot of fun here. And there's the number 45. That was Adam Petty's race car that he won his race that you saw earlier. So that's the end of our video. And I'll show you a couple other buildings around the Victory Junction campus. Hope you enjoyed learning about the Pettys and a little bit about Level Cross, North Carolina. Really interesting area to visit.